Hey everyone, how's it going? Happy Saturday. Glad to have you all here and joining us today here at MindMineTV, here live on Twitch every Saturday at 1 p.m. PDT. Awesome to have you all here today.
And this Saturday, we are continuing on our 35 questions that you've probably never asked yourself, but kudos if you did.
That's right. We are on part 3 right now. So we are taking on questions 11 through 15 out of 35. And again, some of these are very introspective. Some of them are, I guess, just another way of looking at things. You know, looking at maybe how your life is or how you view things around you as. So it's really actually pretty cool, this full list, these 35 questions here. So we've been having a blast, and we know that everyone else has been having some great commentary on this and discussion on this. So that's why we wanted to continue on with this. And if you're joining us via podcast, so whether it's iTunes, Podbean, or what have you, thank you very much for hanging out with us. Feel free to follow or subscribe on that platform for completely free, as well as leave a review. Let us know your thoughts on the podcast, as it greatly helps us to grow the community and get more people involved and have more people be able to voice their opinions. And so, again, feel free to hang out there, as well as join us live on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/MindMineTV, where you can see us live every Saturday, or pretty much every other day for game streams if you're into gaming, where we do a lot of our live content. So love to have you here as well, and be able to, I guess if you will, digitally to face, not so much face to face, but digitally to face, share your thoughts and ideas and have us share them to everyone else as well.
And I'm excited to continue on this little series that we've got ourselves. We basically get through about 5 questions of these 35 deep questions per episode, which is fantastic because it really allows us to have a lot of really in-depth discussions with our audience. So definitely join us for that. We'll probably be doing the same thing next Saturday as well.
Absolutely right, as we slowly go through these questions. Let's get started then, right? So to give you an idea of some of the past questions that we've had, we've been taking on all different kinds of things, from are humans better at creation or destruction? What are the most common roadblocks that stop people from achieving their dreams? And is it possible to live a normal life and not ever tell a lie? So we've been taking on questions like this and this upcoming one, which is number 11. What is the most beneficial emotion? How about the most destructive? So this question is a twofer here, is how do we view, or what do we view as the most beneficial emotion? And then what do we view as the most destructive emotion? And for those live here in chat, feel free to jump in as well. And join us. Let us know your thoughts on this too, because we want to make this as much of a conversation as possible rather than just having us talk at you. So,
you want to start it up?
Yeah. So, what is the most beneficial emotion? From my perspective, I would have to say it's empathy. It's being able to empathize with others, because we are very tribal beings, and again, no one can be just an island, out there by themselves. We do need other people, and we utilize the creations of others every single day, whether we truly realize it or not. And so to be able to empathize helps us to push us forward as a society, and helps against, major things like extinction. That's at least my viewpoint. Being able to empathize, being able to actually give a damn about other people. And I was thinking about this too, actually. I don't know. I think because of some of the other questions last Saturday, it just had me kind of thinking of like different things, like the creation and destruction question specifically. I was thinking about what kind of emotions drive that and everything. And I think, with empathy, we focus in on how to grow rather than how to destroy, how to create rather than just destroy. Or if it is destruction, ideally it's destruction with the intent of creation from the ashes.
Ooh, I like that. Rather
than just destruction and leaving it be and letting it rot, basically. So I think with empathy brings out the best a lot. at times of people. Not always. Sometimes it can be slightly misguided. Biases can come into play if you empathize a little too much. But I
and you
think,
become a doormat.
but otherwise, I think though that overall, though, I think empathy is probably one of the most beneficial to help us survive. And you could say too that like, well, what about the people who are very like kind of isolated or almost like hermits? They're very misanthropic about people and try to stay away from people. Well, even still, then they rely on other people. They learn the tools of the trade and how to survive and everything else. In a way that is empathetic, and therefore, they have learned and been able to survive off of that. So I think that's at least my general thought on that. As for the most destructive, I think it would have to be, in a way, probably. And this has different facets, but I think overall just fear. Because honestly, I think fear can induce hatred. Fear can induce aggression. Fear can induce a lot of different things that we do consider negative, again, depending on the situation. And I think that's where the many facets come into play. What is intent? What is the specific situation, and everything like that. So again, it's not as clean, black and white, but I think that fear overall. Now, fear can teach you a lot of good things, though, too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that fear is altogether bad, because we do learn from fear. We do process it, and it does keep us alive. It is a survival mechanism. But I think if we don't evaluate that emotion of fear well enough, we respond very destructively, which then again fuels hate. It can fuel violence. It can fuel many different things. Because again, it can be very easy to be angry and not have any thought behind it. You know what I mean? Like, we can get angry at things all the time. You trip over something, you blame it instead of you because you're clumsy. You know what I mean? But I think overall that fear can really fuel it and make it a much bigger, a much larger mechanism, much larger thing to worry about. Because, like, for instance, like, hate, for example, you can hate something but get over it. But fear can help stoke the flames, can help be a major catalyst to fuel the fire in a way to make it 1,000 times worse. So again, I think that fear is the source of it that can help fuel and make things progress unbelievably without any sort of control. So those are my two, at least. But what about for you?
I was thinking about this question, and I'm not 100% sure what I would categorize as the most beneficial emotion, because a little bit of kind of how you mentioned, in some ways I feel like it's situation specific in a way. But I think I want to say that overall, I think the most destructive, I feel like that's easier for me to start with. I feel like the most destructive is anger. And because no matter what, anger never leads to good stuff. And anger itself, of course, is a kind of, even when you're looking at it on a spectrum, right, it is a destructive emotion to begin with. As opposed to something like fear, where fear doesn't necessarily, it can lead you to inaction as well, in that way as well. Because I was thinking fear at first for the destructive, and then I was thinking more about it and my personal opinion and how I feel about things and what I've experienced. And I feel like when fear leads to anger is the destructive point, I would say. Because your body doesn't think clearly, your mind isn't thinking clearly, and you can't make decisions correctly. And when you are angry, usually people just want some sort of like vengeance, or I'm right, you're wrong, let me show you how. To me, anger is the ultimate destructive emotion.
Interesting. Yeah, because I would say too, like, how when I mentioned fear, a lot of people said too, well, you can learn from it. I even said that. But then also you can learn from hatred too is the thing. And a lot of times you can actually work through hatred. I've seen and I've experienced, you can actually work through hatred. Again, and then now we're talking about, well, it depends on the person. It depends on their mentality, their way of processing information, and how they handle certain emotional cues. But you can also progress positively through hatred, and it can drive you to want to be better or to improve yourself or your situation. And a lot of times many people can then move beyond that hatred, realizing that what they didn't quite need the hatred as really just a motivation to move forward.
Yeah, and I think hatred is a longer emotion. I'm referring to like the anger in sort of that short term reaction, whereas hatred is more of a. It feels like it's more of a choice. Like you hate something because X, Y, and Z you've learned over time, or you decided to, maybe. Whereas I feel like anger, and we can look at the semantics. I was trying to pull up the exact definition of the two, to look at the semantics of the word. But anger to me is something that's in the moment, in a way.
Yeah, you could be angry, and then later on you can be happy.
Yeah, whereas hatred of something tends to stay until you are potentially convinced otherwise, maybe, or something like that. Again, it might be semantics, but I think it's just that like impulsive emotion of anger that I'm thinking of specifically, because in some ways I feel like it's brought on by irrationality or something that has happened right now and then, and you don't have the ability to kind of step back and say, hold up, why am I angry? Maybe.
So we're talking about more of like hatred takes time, it takes planning. It's like planning out a war. You don't just one day go, hey, by the way, we're here with all these tanks. We don't know where they came from. They just kind of appeared because, we hate you guys. So we're at your borders, basically. But angry is like an explosive bomb then. So that's like, it's an unstable system or item that has the potential of going bad very quickly. Not that then you can't move forward after that, but the damage, it could be very, what do I want to say? I'm like at a loss of words today. It's one of those days. But can be a lot worse because it's so instantaneous or happens so quickly that it's hard to get any thought behind it or any processing and go, whoa, wait. Let's think about this. Right,
yeah. Hatred to me feels a little bit more systemic, more constant. So I did look it up. It does say that if you think about the difference between anger and hatred in two ways, which is intensity and duration. Anger might be triggered when someone does something that frustrates us, but it tends to come and go and doesn't crowd out all our other feelings for, let's say, the person that did something that frustrated us. But hatred lasts longer and is more pervasive. It tends to overwhelm us and obscure everything else we might feel. And so to me, I think, sometimes anger, it can hurt both on a very small level, right? Like sort of the example that they gave us, that you can say something in anger to someone and not actually mean it, maybe, or maybe that's not the right time to say it. Versus hatred, where like if you hate something, you're planning it out and you're doing all this stuff and you're spending your energy else in a different way. But yeah.
So really, what we're saying is whatever induces impulsivity is what's bad, or can be very, very bad, or one of the most destructive things is that whatever fuels impulsivity, which could also be love in a way, and that can go very badly. It could be jealousy in a way, which can go very badly. And I think that's interesting then too, because again, there is no clear black and white per se. Maybe looking at it from that way rather than the emotion, it's whatever induces a kind of response in a way. So if it's an impulsive response, okay, we have to be careful and mindful of these type of emotions because it can go south very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that's where and I think when I was mentioning fear too, I think that's where, I feel like that's kind of the thing that can help drive that path to a negative impulsive reaction in a way too. So I think we're on the same line as just kind of how we're coming from it, though.
Right, yeah, because with fear, even leading to inaction, right? Like if someone stops somebody in their track, but if they, if they see somebody accidentally fall into the water, and they're afraid of going to save them, and then so they don't, right? That could be, in a way, destructive, because they're not able to help. Maybe even if they know how to swim, but something about it, the fear stops them.
Well, and because we're live on Twitch, the thing that comes to mind, of course, is when you're in games like zombie games, let's say, for example, and you're so used to getting attacked that you have this innate fear built in that builds up over time. And I've seen it so many times where people will go in to a house or something and all of a sudden see someone just react and shoot.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they realize, oh shit, that was a friendly NPC. Like, I needed that quest. I needed to buy stuff. They were a traitor. Damn it. Well, where's my last save at? But it happens so easily, which, again, and I know actually a member of our community has mentioned us talking about gun violence. I will mention that's that impulsivity that scares the shit out of me, of everyone just having any sort of weapon and being able to just, have at it. Because I feel like, again, you get this fear, even if it's built up in your head, one day you just snap and just react to something.
Right, yeah. Well, and that's why training of the armed forces or, officers, or anytime that you give somebody power to wield some type of weapon that may be able to hurt someone else, if you don't train them to not have that fear, to not have that reaction, that impulsivity, then that's good. But if they aren't trained properly and they're not used to it, then it's exactly that. They'll just oh shit, and I shoot because I have this weapon with me. Yeah,
I think it's that impulsivity. So whatever drives that is really the key force of this destructive capabilities. Then is what we're hitting on here.
And I think in terms of a beneficial, I would say trust. And that's trust in yourself, trust in a situation, trust in the other people around you, trust in your ability to survive. I think it's that, and because I feel like if you trust that something is going to work out, you won't react in fear. You won't be overwhelmed by all of the other emotions. And if you trust yourself, that you yourself have the ability to continue on, to move past whatever it is, I think that's beneficial because you will find a way to do it. And if you trust the people that are around you, that's sort of a given, right? You trust that they have your best interests at heart. You trust that they're doing the right thing and the best thing that they can do. And so you're less likely to judge or to assume or to project onto them anything negative. So I think that's beneficial. And then trust, I think, also leads to hope and like optimism, right? Mm-hmm. Because you trust that something is going to be a certain way, and then you will work towards it, and you will potentially get other people to work towards that. And that's not to say that trust can't be in a negative way as well, right? You can trust in someone that's bad or is doing bad things, and you can trust that things will get worse. But I think it's beneficial overall.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sort of feeling, that sort of emotion.
Well, I think with that too, and this is not to go too much down the rabbit hole, because I know we can definitely go deep into this conversation, but then it's also being able to educate yourself. And I think that's one of the important things then, is to be able to educate yourself to better understand how things work, how things function, how things are. And through educating yourself will help break down the lack of trust and thus help quell some of the impulsivity. And we see this all the time in the political arena. There are people who just go off of platitudes and just say, see, these people are doing this and we need to hate this group or that group, or this person's trying to do this to me and that to me because this person said so. But it's like, okay, well, look at the facts. Is that actually true? And then you get people who feel so insecure because they followed this line of thought, a very thin line of thought, but still a line of thought this whole entire time. And they don't want to let it go now because that's what they know, because that's the only bit of it that they know, without actually educating themselves on it. And it's not to say that they'll find out that everything they were saying were falsitudes. Not saying that at all, but it does help against some of that aggression or feeling that someone is trying to repress you or do something else when they're actually not. It could very much be the other way around even. But I think helping to educate, to better understand, thus builds trust, thus will help against impulsivity, thus will help so that way you're not negatively fueling these emotions that we go through, and thus becoming a ticking time bomb in a way, in whatever situation and reaction that may be.
Hear, hear.
And we also have some great stuff going on in chat right now. So besides the praise of my hair, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Nice haircut. All right, I'll take it. Thank you, Denise and Fused. We also have, let's see here. Denise says, I think jealousy is very destructive. Trunk says, asks if empathy is an emotion, though. And I would say, well, I guess overall you could say, again, if we're looking at a domino effect where this emotion kind of connects to this emotion, which then leads to this thought, thus, leading to this reaction, maybe more so I could say is love for others, which then you could kind of sum up into, well, being empathetic helps you understand other people, thus having a sort of, in a general sense, a love or connection, a feeling of connection to other people in a positive manner, thus inducing positive reactions to them. But no, that's a fair question as well. Denise says, and compassion is key for me as a beneficial emotion. Trunk says, I would say hate is most destructive, self-hate and the hate of others. And then, of course, Red Siskin bringing it back to the Twitch reverse. 2 minutes in Arma, and you hate 30% of the world. 30 seconds in Fortnite, and I hate most EU countries. 10 seconds in PUBG, and I hate myself.
Oh, no.
That needs to be a meme somewhere. That needs to have an image with that text right on it. I think that is brilliant. Thank you for sharing that, Red. Trunk says, most helpful emotion is love in all categories, from erotic to charity to altruism to self-love. And fear, anger, and hate. The Sith code is strong here.
Indeed.
Oh, I'm enjoying the chat here. Thank you so much, guys, for being involved here. Hey, Dalamalls, how's it going, man? Good to see you today. Let's see here. All right. Do you want to hit on the next topic then, or?
All right, let's move on. So speaking of emotions, are emotions necessary for human survival? And why or why not? Feels like one of those questions you get in like English class. Go to town. Why or why not? Be sure to cover both specifics. Are emotions necessary for human survival? So here's a fun fact, right? A lot of shows about the future where we, meet aliens or the aliens are talking about us and all that other stuff. What I see the trend is that a lot of aliens are like, oh, humans are so passionate. Like, that's their thing, right? I feel like that's how humans get described in almost every sci-fi book I have read or sci-fi film that I've seen. It's like, it's our passion for like doing stuff and living and surviving, but it's like that passion and emotions, right? The Vulcans say this about us all the time, right? It's very emotionate, the humans. So, this question, when I saw it, are emotions necessary for human survival? To me, that's what it brings to mind. It's like, well, yeah, it's like in our code, right? Like it's in our DNA to be passionate, to have emotions, bad or good, but we have them. And emotions seem to be something that the writers of sci-fi tend to point out all the time. That it's our emotions that not only set us apart from whatever species we might encounter outside of the Earth, but also what drives us and what gives us purpose in a way. And I would say that that's a very, of course, human-centric view because we haven't met any aliens yet, as far as I know. But in terms of, are emotions necessary for our survival? not sure. Because, there's other things on our planet that survive that arguably have no emotions. So in terms of actual survival, I don't think so. Like physical survival of a human, I don't think emotions are necessary. I think that if you've got the physical mechanisms in place to properly react and alert you when something is dangerous for you, then you don't need necessarily the emotion to continue surviving physically. But I think that emotions or a survival as like humanity and our culture and our species and our evolve, like to evolve further, I do think that they're important, because then it takes it from more than just survival on a physical level to survival in a more, I guess, abstract sort of manner.
Well, I think probably what you're talking about is the concept of general everyday survival, like, hey, I'm living, I'm kicking still, thumbs up for that.
Thumbs up.
And also then longevity and growth. And I think that's separate from survival, because we look at many different species that have not evolved, but to a point, but continue on. And it's just based on, okay, I've taken in some sort of nutrients in some sort of fashion.
Right.
I'm here, I'm gone. And then again, there's somewhere in between, there's like a breeding process or something like that to continue on. So I think the generalization in a very general way, no, you do not, but it does greatly impact longevity, especially of the species as a whole. And again, I think too, like, it's easier to say yes or no to this question of emotions not being necessary when it comes down to the individual to a very basic level. But I think, again, when we start talking about society and cultures, we start talking about groups of people, then yes, it does play a massive impact. And that's where, again, we get longevity. That's where, again, we also get the sense of growth and evolution in the things around us, thus hopefully improving life for all those within that species.
So the follow-up question then would be, why is pharma so hell-bent on removing our emotions with their damn pills?
Because they get money and they feel really good. They feel great.
They feel super awesome.
They don't care about you. They feel awesome. But yeah, I think because, and again, I say that loosely too, because as I mentioned previously, when it came to fear does protect you, right? It is a survival mechanism because you know not to go buy something again. So like, and I'm not saying buy as in B-U-Y, but as in B-Y.
But also buy.
Well, yeah. But like, for instance, you're not going to hang around a pack of wolves if you were attacked the last time around. And ideally, fear is what's going to get you running away from them. It's that anger and whatnot and that fear that's going to then drive the adrenaline and that fight or flight, whether you're going to fight for something or run away from something. So you also have to then think about some of those situational things that will occur. The things you come across in your environment like that. So I think then, yes, that does still come very much into play. But I think on a very base level, again, if we're really going to simplify it, because again, there's multiple layers to every single one of these questions, to every single one of these subjects. So you could say, yeah, but what about this? And what about this? And what about this? But if you're looking at a very base level and then work your way up, in a way, many of these different layers are all right to a point. But again, we're trying to dig deep as best as we can, as best as possible on our end, to look at it, well, from the sense of like, okay, hunger, signal to brain, great, grab food, eat. Very, very, very basic, very basic.
And it's not, it doesn't have to be driven by emotion.
It doesn't have to be. No, it doesn't. Because then at that point, what you're saying with emotions, adding on then a hamburger would be great. I love hamburgers. Now I'm craving a very specific food over just like, okay, I need to eat something. And I know for a fact that this will not kill me.
It's like essentially, if you look at, an AI, for example, and we didn't program them to have some sort of emotional response to anything, but they could run diagnostics and say, oh, I gotta, I don't know, charge myself because I'm running low on battery. And then there it is. Like, you don't have to have emotion for that to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the general, like, okay, how am I doing? Like, am I breathing? Do I still have 10 fingers, 10 toes? Can I walk? Can I sit? But I do think that emotions are a fuel that helps drive far much more than us just being basic vegetables, really. You know what I mean? Like, it does do so much more and really amplifies things. And I think emotions are the very next layer. So the very core base level of layer of just basic, like, intake, outtake is there. And then the next, just right on top of it, is the emotion for everything else to be built off of. Where do we go from just living, just breathing, just taking up oxygen? What is that next level? That next level is emotions, and where that drives us from there. So at least that's my general thought. So it's a very skin tight layer. It's like putting yourself into a diving suit. That's the emotion bit of it. You know what I mean?
I'm gonna have to draw out the MindMineTV layers of what you need to survive as a human being. Bottom layer, then like really tiny right on top. Emotion layer.
So we got a bunch of people chatting away also on this topic in chat. I don't know if you want to take some of it on.
Yes, Fuse Fury says emotions have fueled some of the greatest moments of humanity and some of the worst. We wouldn't be where we are today without them, for better or worse. Exactly. And Dalamaz says emotions are necessary for a civil society. Look at all the people who have gone through shock therapy and have no strong emotions, or someone who's had an injury to their brain and don't really have emotions. And in what form would humanity survive in if you have no emotion to better yourself? So we're seeing a lot of the same, I guess, answers in a way of, right, for basic survival, so that you don't physically die is one thing, but then emotions sort of propel us to this next level of humanity, of our society, of our culture, of the things we have done and the things we have accomplished, both good and bad,
mm-hmm.
which is true.
And sometimes it can be very difficult for people. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. It just is what it is that it can be very difficult for people to separate that too. Because we're surrounded by things all day that we care about, ideally, right? Or that, invoke some emotion or another. So it's very odd for most of us to think of being in a world where that isn't part of our kind of survival, our everyday, in a way.
Right. Well, in the U.S., people talk about emotional marketing, and marketing in general is effective marketing does play on your emotion,
mm-hmm.
And plays to your. It's more than just your survival needs at that point that it preys on. So we're definitely surrounded by all of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely, every single day.
Let's see if there's some more stuff here.
Yeah, and thank you, by the way, for everyone. Even if you're lurking and just hanging out, enjoying the conversation, thank you for being here. But also thank you to everyone who's sharing their ideas, concepts, philosophies, and what have you. Again, it is greatly appreciated, whether it's, equal to, or I should say the same as others, or if it's, different, coming from a different perspective. That's ideally what we want to talk about, and at least get those different pathways of communication out there, so that way we understand that there are different ways of thinking, there are different ways of looking at something, whether we agree or agree to disagree, either way. So we greatly appreciate the conversation in chat.
And Denise sums up pretty well here too. Instinct trumps emotions if you want to survive. Physically, for sure.
Yeah, instinct can have a major impact. But again, instinct, though, I think some of that is hardwired into us because of an original emotional response. When you really look at habitual actions, for instance, if someone was attacked by a dog, they can have now a more instinctual reaction to flinch when they see one, even if it's not doing anything.
Right.
So they kind of can, depending, they can work very much hand in hand as well.
And Trunk brings up the question, is empathy an emotion? And to quote, a source of information on the internet, Wikipedia, empathy is the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from within their frame of reference. There are many definitions for empathy that encompass a broad range of emotional states. So there's different types of empathy, like cognitive empathy, emotional empathy, and somatic empathy, and so on and so forth. So I would say that it sounds as if empathy is actually it's not just one singular emotion. It is multiple types of emotions in some manner or form, I would say.
Yeah, so emotion or empathy itself is not one emotion, but can be many, depending on, again, the specific form of empathy we're talking about.
Right. For example, like including caring for other people and having a desire to help them, which is something that you said, where that love for others, in a way, as well. So for that, I would say it's a toolbox of emotions, in that manner. All right. A lot of good chat in chat. We're just going through a little bit, seeing if there's anything else.
Yeah, and I will say, chat, please be careful of telling someone no, they're wrong, or no, this is how it is. Please don't do that. We will time out people who do that. Again, we want to make sure that, if you disagree with something someone's saying, please make sure just to say, well, this is why I believe this is this way. Again, some things can be blatantly obvious wrong, like what is the day today? What is the time right now in California? I mean, there are those things, but with some of the things that we're talking about multiple layers. So please be careful of just diminishing someone else's thoughts. I want to make sure that we don't see that in chat as best as possible. And I appreciate everyone for not doing that and for just, again, being engaged. So it's not to say we don't want you involved or engaged. Just be careful of how you present your information, please.
So, I think I answered that, and you answered that, right?
Yeah, no, we definitely hit on that.
All right, we're on the next question. Take it away.
So, number 13. What's something terrifying that we've all come to accept as a fact of life?
Oh.
So, what's something terrifying that we've all come to accept as a fact of life?
It's a cheery question there. Something terrifying.
And this question is a little shaky in a way.
Shaky? How do you mean?
Well, in the sense of you're saying that we've all come to accept. Do you realize how hard it is to get even 5 people in a room to accept the same thing a lot of times? It can be very difficult. It can be, depending, again, situation, tactics.
I would say that it's less about accepting as oh yes, we agree on this, but rather something that is potentially happening right now that we're just yep, that's what happens. Just to throw out an example, death, right? Our inevitable death is something that is terrifying. That I'm imagining most people have accepted as, yep, at some point in my life, my physical body will cease to do it for me. Yeah. For example, rather than an exception, some 5 people in a room being yes, I accept that this color is blue.
Right. No, but what I'm saying is that, but then other people can disagree with that. And I'm not one of them, but there are many people out there who say, well, no, there's reincarnation, there's ways of coming back, there's all this other stuff, there's a beyond.
Right.
And so
this is why it's a question of what you believe that is something.
Well, yeah,
that terrifying aspect that
well, it doesn't say you. It says what's something terrifying. I'm looking at semantics here. I'm looking at the specifics. I'm just saying at the specifics of the question, because I know people in chat will point something out in this. What's something terrifying that we've all come to accept as a fact of life? Now we can say, well, that would be the end of thus life, the ending of, but many people think and say, especially depending on the religion, that it is actually just a beginning. So that's why I'm saying it's like, it's kind of shaky whether you want to say, well, I have scientific evidence here, or nah, I don't have anything, whatever it may be. Again, I'm not saying one way or the other, but just that it can be a...
Would you say that the exception of that as being a fact of life, does that somehow negate the ability to change that fact of life?
By not agreeing with it? I'm saying, though, I get what you're saying. What I'm saying, though, is that, again, from what we've all come to accept. So, again, I'm really hitting on the specifics of the question itself is all.
Right.
Not, again, yeah, does just ignorance negate that? No, hell no.
No, not ignorance, but I'm saying, for example, going back to the death aspect example that I gave, just because someone is actively trying to stop death or bring forth that, no, there's reincarnation and all of that good stuff, it doesn't mean that they haven't accepted that the death will happen and that they're either spinning it in a different way. I don't know. I feel like you can still there can be something that's accepted as a fact of life.
Well, I mean, I would say, though, but again...
So you're saying so that could be
your
answer.
But it's terrifying. If people do truly believe that there is something greater beyond this life, then it's not really actually terrifying. There are many people that do embrace it. So that's where I'm getting at semantics. I'm not saying personal belief. I'm literally looking at the question based on the words is all.
Okay, so then,
I'm just being a pain in the
answer...
ass in a way. I am literally just doing devil's advocate a little bit here, because I know some people will bring that up. So I'm hitting on it now, knowing, just to let folks know, we see that. We get that.
Well, I mean, your answer could be like, there is nothing terrifying that we've all come to accept as a fact of life. I mean, that's a valid answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone is afraid of something differently, for sure. I mean, my generalized off-the-cuff answer off of just like first instinct actually was war. The fact that we've come to what's terrifying to me in general is the fact that we've become so we've considered war so nonchalantly. That would be the thing that terrifies me, is that we hear, oh, there's 7 massive wars basically going on right now in the world, plus many smaller ones, many a lot larger, but some very small ones too. And we all look at it and read it and go, oh, that sucks. Okay, so where's the comics section? Where's the where I need to see Garfield or Dilbert or
Garfield's still around? Wow.
Yeah, can't keep that fat cat down. But I think the generalization of just like actual war and the fact that people are so desensitized to it and they're just like, oh, that sucks, rather than being like, no, we need to get action in here to stop this shit, because why are we even there in the first place? I think just the willingness to go to war and accept war once we're already there, just to go, oh, well, we're already there. Like that, it's not like you're, not like someone cut you in front of you in line, and you're like, oh, well, they're already there, whatever. Just we'll move on. I'll eventually get my spot and order my food. Like, it's not the same goddamn thing, because, them cutting in front of you does not mean that 5 million people die. You know what I mean? Like, so, just instinctually, that would be my response. But I do think, though, that if we're really breaking down semantically the question itself, there is nothing that we can all agree on is truly terrifying, because we're all going to get something or another, depending on our situation. Because there are many people in other countries that would say starvation, the loss of a parent would be the most terrifying thing. The loss of a friend, or which again, then you could then lead into, well, like death, for instance, the end of life overall. You could also say a group of people. This is the most terrifying thing, is that we let these group of people do X, Y, and Z, or what have you. There are a multitude of things that I think people will choose in many respects. But my instinctual response would be just war as just being an everyday occurrence in life. And that, oh, that's just what happens, And again, we've had wars since, time began, basically. There's always been some kind of feud or something like that. But what I'm really getting to is that, to the level that we're at based on the technology that we have now, based on the weapons that we have now. That is what's terrifying too. So I think it's maybe then the real core root of it is our technology that we possess and how it can be used for negative then, which thus will help propel a war. Maybe that's really what the root cause of it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's me. Complex answers for complex questions. Never a clear black and white per se, always several overlapping layers.
Well, and kudos for you for questioning the question. Oh.
One question at a time.
Yeah, no, I think along the same lines, I actually do think that what a lot of us, I think that something that we have all come to accept as a fact of life, regardless of whether we like it or not, but rather that it does happen, is that that people have violent tendencies, whether that's what's the word I'm looking for here? Whether that's expressed in something like waging war, or destruction of some kind, or playing on a PvP server, or playing on a PvE server and destruction of the things that you need, like resources, right? I think that there are violent tendencies in all of us that we have come to accept as a fact of life, but that those tendencies are on a spectrum, is what I think. Because when backed into a corner, and it's our survival or not, I think our violent tendencies come out.
Mm-hmm.
In some form or fashion, and that to me is terrifying. But we did talk about humans creating and destroying, so that is part of our nature. Overall, even when you're doing something like eating, right? You've something was destroyed to make that to make that food. So that would be my answer.
Nice. God, we're getting deep today. We're getting so deep.
Like, I'm hungry, but now I feel bad about it. Because something was destroyed for me to have that food in whatever fashion or form it is. But it's okay. We just eat it.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless. And I'm not talking just like animals versus plants. I mean, when you're eating something that is plant-based, you still had to destroy that plant. Even maybe if you created it for that for that exact purpose, for it to be destroyed, right? But that to me is violent tendencies, right? Like, in some ways, you have to destroy something to create something else, right? But we don't even think about it. We just eat, right?
Constant consumers, even if it's not directly eating, we're constantly taking in.
Right, and that to me is a violent thing. Maybe you yourself aren't doing it, but you are supporting the action of, in some ways. And again, it's terrifying, and I think we've all come to accept it, right? If
Mm-hmm.
it's between me surviving and this whatever other item not surviving, okay, I win.
Well, yeah. Well, we've even gotten to the point where let's say one person tries to help another, tries to support them. A lot of times the other person that receives the good will question it and automatically try to spin a negative onto it, because it doesn't happen as often as we would in our ideals, like, right? Because we're always taking, grabbing, consuming, survival. I need this, I need that, rather than actually having it be a norm in our society where it's like, yeah, people are going to look out for one another when they can. And I guess I'm just trying to say that with that definitely supports your concept that, yeah, we're just so used to the consumption, to that sense of violence, that in a way, depending on your version of violence, of like the take.
Let me look up what
the
violence
action
means.
of taking this kind of one-sided action. So yeah, that can make a lot of sense. I've seen a lot of people who get really weirded out when you do something nice for them. It's almost like you might as well just have shot their dog in the face or something. Like, that's the reaction a lot of people give you. And I'm just like, what the hell? What is wrong with people right now? Like, they're not used to this sense of just someone willfully just going, no, like, I want to support you. You seem to be having a good head on your shoulders, and I don't need a cup of, I don't need to go to Starbucks basically every single day for the next month, and I can financially, help you with this situation, or I can invest my time into you. That is fine, because I just want to help. But no, it's like, what do you want? You want something. You want to take. You want to consume. You want something from me. But I want something, and I'm tired of people taking from me because I feel like people are taking from me. Yeah, it's like this vicious cycle of just take.
The definition of violence, to make sure we've got it here, is behavior involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something. Also, strength of emotion or an unpleasant or destructive natural force. So kind of works.
Anyway, I mean, I guess you can also think of like intent as well.
Yeah, so this is I'm looking at the noun of violence, but that's what I was saying, that it was the violent tendencies, which you can look up the word tendencies as well, but yeah, that kind of destructive tendencies that we all have, and again, just because you're not doing it, or that you didn't actually apply the physical force, I mean, that's just the bystander effect, right? That other people talk about when you're not the one bashing that person on the street. Yeah, but you're not doing anything to stop it either. So, I mean, it's like a gray area there. But
right. You can say like, oh man, I hate when people throw trash on the ground, and then you see trash on the ground, so you yourself refuse to pick it up, but you still are pissed off and fuming like, oh, who would do that? And then you get in the question of like, ethics here and morals of like, well, yeah, who's worse than the person who initially did the action or the person who hates the action but does nothing about it and just bitches and moans and walks away from it?
Right. And I will say that Evin literally, if we're somewhere and someone has like thrown something on the floor or like left something behind, just like in a lazy, obvious manner, like Evin will go pick it up and like help out the establishment, like the space that we're in. Actually,
well, you were there. I had one of the owners of a place who offered me a job. They're like, you're hired. And I'm like,
oh my God, yes. We were at like this restaurant or something, or
it was a restaurant/store.
Yeah. And yeah, like I guess you're like basically just like tidying up after this like random person just like left all their shit everywhere. And yeah, the woman's like, oh my God, you're hired. The woman who worked there. I think she's like one of the owners or something.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I didn't know I was applying for a job.
Right. Well, I just kind of looked at her and I was like, huh? What? And I'm like, oh, she's the owner. Because I've seen her before. And I was like, yeah, okay, thanks. And I just kind of like moved on. I'm like.
And Dalamas, to answer your question, so you ask, my cousin is a type of vegan that will only eat fruits and vegetables that naturally fall off the trees or the plants. So is it destroying or further preventing, or is it preventing further growth by decomposing? So if we're looking at the definition of violence, where you're using physical force to hurt, damage, or kill something or someone, I mean, just because those things fell off the trees doesn't mean that they have to, continuously keep on damaging it, right? That's like kicking somebody when they're down. So, I would say again, you're still, or your cousin is still essentially destroying that item and not letting it go through its full natural process. It would be my answer. In which case, yes. Still destroying. I'm not saying that there's a way to get around this eating, right? Our eating for survival will always destroy something. Like that's
You
That's
can't
what
live
it
without
is.
consumption based on what type of consumption.
Right, but like you can't. There's always going to be, because your body, you're naturally, even if you're like drinking water, let's say, right, like your body is going to destroy that, and use its building blocks to help you.
Mm-hmm.
So either way, you're destroying it. Like that's just the nature of life, and that's what I'm saying. It's a fact of life, as far as I'm concerned. Like things have to be destroyed so that something else can use those building blocks to create, to sustain.
But depending on the type of destruction, yeah, it can be very terrifying.
Right.
Exactly. No, and that makes a lot of sense too.
I'm in the dictionary corner today. That's right, Fused.
Well, keep in mind, folks. I mean, you laugh about that. It's funny, but keep in mind that if we were just to say something without pulling off actual information from dictionaries, thesauruses, whatever, there would be someone in chat going, "Well, today, I looked on page 32 of Webster's, and right there on this word, on this line, it says this specifically." So we want to make sure that we're at least trying to say, hey, look, we're not just spouting stuff at you because we have a microphone in front of us, but that we have thought about this in some form or fashion, and that we are looking up information to help kind of support why we think the way we think. And that's very important too. I think it's very important to clarify that you can't just spout things and just say, oh, well, this is the way it is, because that doesn't help a conversation. Go, okay, well then why do you think this is the way it is? What has led you to that process? And so that's what we're trying to do here too, to help with that, with the actual conversation, to make this a conversation, rather than to tell you, well, this is wrong, this is right, suck it up, get a helmet cupcake and deal with it. Which sometimes can be the situation though too. But I think overall with subjects like this, in order to have that proper conversation, you just say, well, this is where I'm getting my thought process from, because it helps you to also understand and be able to actually communicate effectively. We can't communicate effectively if we're just saying, well, no, that's wrong. Well, no, that's wrong. Oh, well, here's a source I got that. Well, that source is stupid. Ha ha, you looked it up. Like, we've got to be careful, again, of how we use our language, because it does impact our psychology and how we communicate, and whether we actually have an effective line of communication or not. So just be mindful of that too as we go through the process. And that goes for anyone, not just Tatiana, but for anyone in chat too. Like, we want to make sure that is clarified as well.
Also, I heard cupcake helmets in there. Did you guys?
No, I said get a helmet cupcake.
I know. I was trying to make a joke.
But I don't want to. I would love to see a cupcake helmet.
That's what I'm saying, right? That would be dope.
Just throwing it out there.
That would be dope. And I knew somebody was going to bring up physics, and I'm by no means a physics expert. But yes, mass and energy in a closed system, so you're not destroying, you're merely changing the state of being of the item, but you're still increasing entropy. Something like that. Yeah, I'm gonna let the physics experts deal with that elsewhere. in terms of that, and whether or not there are multiverses.
The one thing that we really care about is the multi-pass. If anyone knows the fifth element.
That's right, Lilu multi-pass, Lilu Dallas. Okay. Some interesting questions, though, right? Some interesting ways of looking at the world that I certainly never quite looked at until I read the question. And again, as Evan said, we're not here to say this is the right answer or this is the wrong. It's not. We're here to sort of, we're here to express our opinions, have conversations, and get all of our brain cells going in a circle.
Yeah, because usually with our conversations too, a lot of what we discuss is fact-based. It's what's happening out in the news, and we discuss it more in detail. Not saying this isn't fact-based, but just, it varies. There are a lot more gray areas, a lot more different layers to this type of conversation, rather than, let's say, what's currently happening in the Middle East, or what's happening over with this situation where, again, there is a cause and effect to it that we really try to hit on the root on. Here, there can be many different ones, because we're talking about human nature here, which is super complex. And
super complex. Those emotions, man.
That's right. But again, we really do thank everyone thus far who's been chatting and talking about it, and it's been awesome thus far. And we still have a couple more questions here, but I just want to say it's been awesome thus far to see how other people are thinking in the way they're processing the information and how they're responding to it, and especially just based off like how the question is written, what are the words being utilized, because that's really cool to see how communication can impact our way of thinking, again, as I was mentioning previously.
Oh, of course.
You know, what you think of something, like, oh, do we mean of all? Do we mean of a specific society? Do we mean of a, a specific segmentation of said society? Like, there are so many different layers to even really get through just to give an answer as well.
So continuing on with humans here, I believe this is one of the last questions we may have for that. What aspects, talk about a question that's interestingly worded, and I will put this in chat for everybody as well, but what aspects of humans have made us a successful species? Successful. There's my English not a first language showing up right there.
Then a few shots of vodka. Vodka warm. Feel good.
And I believe this is your
yeah, so what aspects of humans have made us a successful species? Well, again, everything is an Occam's razor, right? Like, there's a double-edged sword. There's
a what razor?
An Occam's razor.
Whoa, what is that?
Basically, it's like saying basically like there's two sides to every.
Oh, almost like a double-edged sword, but not.
Right, or a double-edged sword is another way of saying it too. So, I would say that with this, I mean, again, it's another tricky one because. I mean, what I want to initially say is kind of what we've hit on is, when we were talking about like emotions, is it necessary for people to have emotions to survive? But then I was mentioning, well, for longevity and for growth, in that sense, when you look at it that way, yes. And so I think in order for us to be a successful species, having emotions, not closing off emotions, not desensitizing ourselves, like we mentioned also when I mentioned about like the concept of war. And the desensitization of war, that type of destruction, desensitized to it. But again, emotions, as we mentioned, though, can have a negative impact and can have a dark side to things, too, and can bring about destruction when you look at jealousy, hatred, anything that, again, induces that impulsivity. So, yeah, people are going to argue one way or the other on it. But I think initially what I want to say would be emotions. Again, if it wasn't initially for... even if it was that someone did something to make money, initially they were impacted by something that induced an emotion. Even if it was just an emotion that made them feel good. Maybe it was that, the intent originally was, for instance, oh, I made a cure because my sister or my cousin or my wife had this or husband had this disease. And therefore I made it for them, but now it can impact so many others. So yeah, you could say it was kind of a self-centered emotion in a way because they just want to help the other person that they specifically care about, not about a larger group of people who have the same disease, let's say. And again, you can kind of argue that as well. But I think overall, those in some way emotions do play an impact then in the evolution of the things we build, of our tools, of our society as a whole, because of those tools. I think there is great growth there. Even weapons to a point could be considered in a way of growth. Yes, it takes away life, but it could also invoke change to help a larger group of people. There could also be the concept of just having them to induce fear to keep people from actually having war. There's just, very different ways of thinking, but overall, that's all based on emotion. So that would be my, at least, initial response with, again, knowing that there are many caveats out there.
My question, to question the question, would be, what does a successful species mean?
Well, yeah, that's the other thing, too. That's the assumption or bias that everything is super successful, which I guess, when looking at it, is the fact that, hey, we're still kicking after, how much time. Kicking. When looking at the timeline.
Which is small.
Which is overall, for human beings, small. But the fact that, again, we haven't completely annihilated ourselves yet. Hey. Again, one of those thumbs up moments.
We're working real hard towards it, though. We're like,
Some people are. Some people are. Yes, some people are working really hard towards it.
So you would say successful to you is that we're still kicking it. Okay.
Yeah, just in general. Again, yeah, what is successful? What is, what would you consider for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would probably successful to me would also be kicking it, comma, and taking names, like kicking ass and taking names, because we're not only still around, we're like trying to annihilate all the other species and bind them to our will, roughly. But yeah, it's like, there's a saying, somebody once said something like, well, we didn't just fight to get to the top of the food chain and not enjoy it, kind of a thing. But yeah, I would say successful to me is not only that we're still around, right, but that also we are number one. And in that sense, I would say that our emotions definitely play a part. I agree. And similar to what Fuse said earlier, our emotions have given us both our greatest achievements and also our worst achievements. I guess you can have a negative achievement, right? You still achieved it, just negatively. So I definitely say emotions is the one. I would say that the other, because it does ask what aspect. So if we were to add another one on, I would say that there's something in our physiology, and I don't have the right knowledge to speak educatedly on this. But it's whatever spark that happened in our evolution that gave us this ability to use our emotions for good or for bad, and to gave us that the ability to evolve and sort of just that whole process. Like, what's the spark? Like, something happened that like set us on that path, right? Because at our core, we are animals, right? So
impulsivity is a strong part of that as well, by the way.
So something happened that set us apart from the rest of the animals that were around us and sort of set us on that course. And I know there's some of you out there right now thinking, oh, it was aliens. And it's like, I don't believe that personally. But maybe that isn't the answer. But I think something did happen. And I do believe that it was internal. The alchemical base inside of us worked. Some ingredients mixed in the right formula, and it happened. But I do believe that is also integral to our success as a species.
No, I can definitely see that too. And again, you have to look at it too from based on the humans that we see now here today, right? Because there is proof again that there were different kinds of humans in a way, like Neanderthals and everything else, who did not survive based on,
right,
evolution and everything else. So based on the humans that we see today overall, because there are many aspects or parts of being of the human species that did not survive and did not carry over either, looking at it from a scientific perspective there. So but yeah, I would definitely agree too. That's something that just worked, because I know somebody will say, for instance, oh, well, we came out though, right? Look at all of us, but we're saying too that, but you have to look at the fact that there were many niches to our species that did not make it, and it was just our specific niche that happened to. So we're not just saying that it up and happened one day, just boom, know, and that it came to be that we are going to survive now and move forward, but that it was a science experiment. We just got really freaking lucky.
Right.
We got super freaking lucky to be here right now.
We won the lottery ticket, and
that's right. When you
careful what you wish for, I guess.
If you ever get depressed about if you ever get depressed about never winning the lottery, just realize that you are here right now. You were lucky enough out of how many sperm?
That's right.
To make it through the floodgates and make it into this world.
Trunk says, Newsing's reading my mind again. Right? Yeah, what do we mean by successful in this context?
Opposable thumbs also are very good.
Opposable thumbs. That may have been the spark. I don't. Maybe that's.
I can open up a mean can of pickles, a mean jar of pickles. That lid has just I will slay a lid.
But at the same time, as Few says, in some ways, Trunk, it's our brains, our ingenuity. Even if you didn't have opposable thumbs, you could potentially fashion tools that would help you get around that issue. So, the brain.
Evan has the impulse to say impulsivity constantly. Well, that's because it is a word, and that is the word we are talking about. Gotta love the English language, Words, words, words. That's all I ever read. It's just words, words, words. Prove as a species seems more questionable to me. Yeah, and there are a lot of things, again, as we were mentioning, and then people bring it up in chat. Yeah, it's kind of tough, right? Because it's like, well, there are negative connotations to this, there are positive connotations, and then it's like, well, what's right or wrong? And again, we're not trying to get to the core of what's right or wrong because we're going to be really going in circles constantly here. The goal is to highlight that there are pathways, that this is a potential pathway, and just to better understand that overall, and just know that that is an option. And hopefully that you all, by the way, by listening to this, carry on the conversation with others. And, the others that are actually interested, don't just stop them on a bus or something. Be like, hey, by the way, so what aspects of humans have made us a successful species? And go. If you want to see a real impulsive response, there you go, Dalamos, that one was for you. Do that. But other than that, though, again, it's, I don't know. I think it's just important just to understand, again, that there are different pathways and to grow the conversation, whether it's through, if you're a writer, through your writing, if it's through storytelling, through your storytelling, if it's through how you engage with other people every day, then let it be through that. However it may be, again, you take this information and you put it to good use where you feel it needs to be put to good use. Wherever it inspires you or takes you, let it do that.
And I will say to go on a slight tangent off of that I feel like we live in a society where just deep conversations or just conversations about something other than the latest product or the latest film or the items and the things that are around us, but really just conversations about life, the meaning, and the universe, and everything else. It's so rare to find somebody that you can talk with, because I feel like, at least in my experience, one, people don't they just don't want to open up those gates, and I can't tell if that's because they're afraid of what the answers are for themselves, or if they're afraid to show their true selves to somebody else. I can't tell. I feel like it's one of the two, though. And that's sad. And then I think I lost my train of thought. Dang it. But yeah, it's like, it's hard to find those conversations. Oh, and then the other kind of person I think that I meet is the person who wants to prove me wrong in some way. And I'm like, these are just my thoughts. You don't have to, I'm not a quiz. I'm not taking a quiz or anything like that. And I prefer to talk to people who want to have a conversation with me. And it's fine to say, here, this is what I think, and where we might differ is here, and I really think that you should listen to my case. But I do meet a lot of people who constantly, I'll say one thing and they just throw it back in my face with, well, no, you're wrong, and here's the 15 reasons why. And I'm like, okay, well, now we're not having a conversation. You just want to win or something. I don't know. That's weird.
It becomes very, very competitive.
Yeah, and again, like I mentioned before, I'm not an expert on almost anything. I really can't think of a thing that I am an expert on that I have, devoted my entire life to study or know. All I have are my experiences, the knowledge that I have about a variety of things, and what I have researched and read up until this point. So when I do have deep conversations with someone, as it were, I do like to converse, and I do like to hear the other person speak, and I love to find out more about things. Like Evan mentioned, a lot of the stuff that we talk about on our show here, right before we go live, and then even after, I'm still constantly like reading up on something and just getting knowledge. Whether or not a lot of that sticks is another thing, but you can at least say like, hey, I read something about that. I'm a little bit like Tim Allen in Home Improvement when it comes to that. Wilson, our neighbor, will say all this stuff, and then I'm like, I think I heard that right. Let me go rephrase that and say it to someone else, and then I end up screwing it up. But it's good to know stuff,
Yeah, well, and I think, to go off a little bit of what you said too, that's what creates so many divisions. Even if you look at politics as a whole, and by the way, again, I've mentioned this in past episodes, but if you're the type of person who's like, well, I don't want to talk about politics, that is a political stand. By saying, I do not want to talk about politics, one, that is a political stand. Two, politics means anything that actually impacts the people, the polis.
Oh.
And so therefore, again, if anything impacts you, then again, you are taking a political stand. If you say, hey, this game, even because we're on Twitch, if this game is horrible, you are actually taking a political stand. You're taking a stand against something that does impact other people, whether it be the developers, the people buying the game, or what have you, the publishers or what have you. Again, that impacts and and there are many elements in that game that, again, impact people and have to do with politics. You can't just say, well, because I know a lot of people, and they mean well by this, but they say, well, no politics in chat. But as soon as you start saying, well, I hate this and I like this and this, you're taking political stands. You're making choices, and that does impact the way other people think and behave and whatnot. So, that is politics. And I think that it's important to understand that and have those open lines of communication, though, because I think, again, we would still have divisions. We're not all going to agree on everything, but they wouldn't be such massive divisions. They wouldn't be like scars on a community or a country. You know what I mean? Because I feel like there are many countries and many communities that hold scars rather than just dividing lines. It's nothing like a puzzle piece, right? Each puzzle piece is going to be different, but they somehow work and figure out ways of kind of working together to fit in with one another, right? And to be able to kind of live together, right? But we're talking about taking a knife along a puzzle and just running it down. Good luck with really trying to get all of that to work out, right? And so, again, I think not being open and just saying, well, you're wrong, I'm right, or not being even willing to listen and just say, okay, well, let's have an open forum. You can feel free to say what you need to say as long as you can back it up and be, again, appreciative of other people around you too, and say what you need to say. I think, that's important. That is really important, having that understanding and that patience, and again, going back to emotions and just all emotions altogether, that sense of empathy. Like, well, again, if I want to be listened to, I have to expect that the people that I'm speaking to, that I want to listen to me, also want the same thing. And that's how it works, right? It's give and take. It's an ebb and flow. And so you have to have that open line of communication. You have to be able to be willing to give as much as take. You can't just keep filling a glass, right? There is a point where it will overfill. And I think that's where so many of us get to, is they're like, well, here, take more, take more, take more. Me. That it overfills, and then we get these issues where people are like, yeah, these people don't want to listen to me. What the hell is wrong? This person's so conceited and so and then yet at the same time, a lot of these people do the same thing too. I mean, I'm guilty of it. There are times where I do that. I don't think, and then I try to look at it and go, oh shit, yeah, that was kind of a dick move, if you will. And I pull back, or I say a joke that I don't mean that might hurt someone, or a statement. But at least I will try to look at it and apologize for it, or at least understand why I said what I said, and go up to the person and really discuss them with them. Sometimes it's hard because, again, emotions, that impulsivity, right, which we talk about, it seems to be a common theme. You just want to be like, well, I feel like you're attacking me, so then I'm going to attack you. Haha. And especially in stuff like live streaming,
Those
we're all
noises and everything.
You know, in live streaming, we're all very familiar with that feeling, whether we're just a person watching in chat because we don't get to see the other person and all we can read is text, so we put our own connotation or spin to it a lot of times. And tone. Or it's between the streamer and the person in chat. I mean, I think that's even worse in a way because one person can see everything, the other person can't see anything at all, like us, for instance. And so, you know, we try our best to respond in the right way, but it can be very difficult sometimes because, yeah, you just don't have that tone, you don't have that extra bit of connection, and that can really derail a situation. And I think we see a lot of that.
Well, everyone's going to talk politics in our chat now. Here we go. I'm getting ready for it. Yeah, no, I think you're right on those. On that, I mean, I agree with you. I also feel like, in terms of live streaming, why some of the reasoning behind why streamers say, you know, no, I don't want to have, you know, politics in chat or anything like that, is because they don't want to moderate that. They don't want to have to read it and essentially do a little bit of work to try to make sure everyone is okay and everyone understands everybody and all that other stuff. They want to make it a place to you know, be entertained and have light discussion, you know, right? Like I was talking before, it's that whole thing of like, yeah, you're on the bus with all these people, you want to be nice and say hey and like, oh, what are you wearing, and oh, your perfume smells nice and all this other stuff, but nobody wants to have like actual deep conversations because of whether they're afraid to be themselves and say what they believe because they don't want to be judged and all that other stuff, or that they've never, I mean, there are people that have never sat down and been true and honest with themselves and answered some of these questions for themselves, or are afraid of like what they might discover if they open up, if they get too deep.
Oh yeah, well, and I know that like streaming is very different, like because yeah, you don't want to have to go with, well, is this an okay political statement or a not so okay political statement, and is this going to ruin someone's day? Because you also have to think about the community as a whole as well, right? You know, and that's definitely something important too. Like, what did people come here to really enjoy? The game, the conversation, or did they want to go into how political systems aren't working and there's strife and hunger and stuff in the world, right? And, you know, it's like it really depends on the field that you're going for. And yeah, it's tough to try to moderate in the right way. And so I don't mean any offense to those people, but I'm just saying overall, everything we do is political. So it's just being mindful that we don't say specifically, well, these three things are what's considered politics. Everything is considered politics. So again, I think it's just understanding though that factor, and that, you know, maybe be a little bit more specific in your communication then of what you mean. What is actually considered political for you? Like, for instance, you know, I've been in a couple of streams where the streamer says, hey, I keep things PG or PG-13 here. But for people in many countries outside of the U.S., because these streamers are in the U.S., they go, what does that really mean, though?
Right.
Like, you know, our culture considers things very differently in the sense of what is per se PG, PG-13, what's allowed on TV, what isn't. So, you know, what does that actually mean? I've seen that question come up. And most streamers have been really cool about it and been like, oh, no, that's a great point. Let me bring that. No, some have been like, oh, well, like I said, we don't talk politics. And they're acting like that's a political question. And they're like, no, they're just verifying because of culture.
What, there's other people outside the U.S.?
Yeah, right. Well, shocker. And we have many of them in our chat today, actually, which is awesome, too. And again, I keep saying this, but we really do appreciate it. We think it's absolutely amazing. We have everyone... Or everyone here is from all over the place, where they're different parts of the U.S., which is just as, you know, can be as massive of a difference in the way, you know.
Oh, yes.
When you're from Washington State or from Pensacola, Florida, or, you know, Texas or Utah, again, you know, based on your experiences, let alone also, too, from people who are joining us from Denmark, Germany, Sweden, from the Netherlands, from Australia, from the UK, just all different parts, from France and Belgium. And, you know, we thank you all for being here. And it's awesome that we can have these discussions and actually bring in so many different perspectives, too. because it really does force us to think, like, on some of these questions too. Like, well, what culture are you talking about? Are you talking about the Western culture, which is what we say we typically talk about, because that's just what we know, because that's what we're surrounded by every day. We don't want to say we're speaking for Eastern cultures or any other kind of culture outside of, like, specifically like U.S. North America, because we can't give you a full perspective on that. We can give you our thoughts, which is what we will share, and we'll let you know there are thoughts based on the information we get here in the U.S., but that there's only so much we can do too.
And just to wrap up this tangent, Fuse says that I like to imagine what people look like in chat. I do too. I have like little like visual pictures that sort of start to emerge the more that I speak with the same person in chat, and it's from everywhere. It's from everything from like how they write something to what they say as well, and how often they speak, and all of the different things, what emotes they use. It always like starts to create a visual image in my brain, and I have to say I feel like most of the time I get a better sense of their, well, naturally, like you get a better sense of their personality, and that jives a lot with if I see their photo. It's less about the physical matching up, because that like almost never does. You know, like I'm never gonna guess like, oh, this person has red hair, and then they do. It's like, no, never, unless they say it, and then I start to build that image. But usually I'm about like 85% on their personality, because when I see their photo, like part of their personality like shines through in that photo, and I'm like, yes, this is the vibe that I was getting from the words. So at least that's good.
Well, and for everything else, there's Facebook.
Oh,
if you're questioning how someone looks, you can find all the information on Facebook.
Still need to delete my account, man. Still need to do it.
Yeah, if I didn't have clients I'm working with on Facebook, I would totally just leave it. I do not like that platform anymore. Absolutely don't. Just done with it.
You hear that, Facebook? I'm gonna quit you. That's gonna be great.
Like cigarettes.
It's gonna be great.
Don't quit you.
I'm like, I never smoked. What?
No, I'm just in general.
Cloves. A little bit when I was in college, and very on and off since then. Very on and off.
Those crazy college years.
Oh, funny story.
Oh boy. We might as well lighten up the mood a little bit. We've been talking about like destruction and all those.
I think you've heard this story before. It was the first time I actually tried a cigarette, and it happened to be a clove cigarette. So I was like all sorts of confuzzled, but I didn't know how to like do it. Like I didn't know how to like use the cigarette. I remember like walking through the this little part in our campus. It was like later at night. I'm walking with my friend, and he was meeting two of his other friends. We walk up to them, and there's just like this beautiful smell around them, and I was like, oh, what is that? And they're like, oh, well, like they show me their cigarette. So in my mind, in the darkness, I was like, oh, it's a cigarette, like whatever. I was like, man, I've never smelled it like that before. And I'm like, what is it? So when the person's like, oh, it's a cigarette. Do you want it? I was like, sure, I'll try it, whatever. And so like I put it in my mouth, and I just like had it in my mouth, and I was like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this? So it was very weird. I just remember being like, shit, I don't know what to do. And my friend looks at me and goes, all right, you gotta inhale or something like that. He said something like inhale. So I heard inhale. So I started inhaling through my nose. I'm like, it's not working. What the fuck? So everybody just starts cracking up. And my friend's like, no, you have to like do it through the mouth. Like you have to like suck it in through the mouth, inhale. I'm like, oh, like my whole world just, it was pretty funny. It was pretty funny. And then of course like coughed like a mofo, but the clothes are very sweet. So
brought to you by.
I just remember that feeling. He's like, you have to inhale. So I'm all like, okay, trying to inhale through the nose, the cigarettes in my mouth. Like what? Just my mind was not making the connection. I think I told you that story before.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Yeah.
That deserves a fuse patented failfish. Yeah.
I was 18.
She was trying to get her education, folks.
That's right. It's college. That's where you get it. Hey. Well, yeah, right.
You get a lot of education on things that don't involve a degree. Let's put it that way.
That's why I went.
That's why I went.
That's why I have the debt.
So that's a good point too. Now, do we want to hit question 16 here? Because I agree with you on 15. What is the most important thing a person can do to improve themselves? I agree.
I don't think we answered. We didn't even ask question 15 yet.
Yeah, we did. That's what we were talking about.
No, we were talking about successful species, and then we were talking about how people don't like to have deep conversations.
Oh, well, I guess I was assuming because that would be my answer.
Oh, well, let's ask the question. You already have the answer. Can you guess the question?
It was 15. Okay, I thought so. Yeah, we did ask 15. Okay, that's what it was.
Oh, we did?
Yes, that was the answers of 15.
I didn't answer it. What did I answer?
You answered with the communication.
No, I said I'm going off a tangent from the successful species question.
Okay, well, it was 15, but yeah. So what would be your answer then? Because that would be my answer then as well. I was agreeing with that for 15, but yeah, what would be your answer then?
All right, well, for those of you that are living in my world, it's a wonderful world. Come visit. The question is, what is the most important thing a person can do to improve themselves? My answer would be that they both realize and want to improve themselves. I think that's the first step for me.
Yeah. Like you have a problem that you need to fix, and then...
Right, like realizing like this is not the end and be all. You don't know everything. There's ways to improve yourself. Even if you think that you're... I used to work in HR, so I heard a lot of people, say, well, I'm at the top of my career ladder. Like, where do I go now? And I'm like, you can always improve something. It may not necessarily be professionally if you think you've reached the top, but which I feel like is untrue. But if that's what you feel like, that's your prerogative, obviously. But you can improve yourself in other ways. You can improve yourselves personally and emotionally, mentally, spiritually, however you want to look at it. But I think you have to have the realization that you need to improve yourself, or that there is room for improvement, I guess. And then the want to do it. Everything else will fall into place, I think, after that. I think that's the most important part.
That makes sense. Well, as the saying goes, we've mentioned it before previously, is that you can't help those who don't want to also help themselves. Because they're going to look at your assistance as an obstacle. And that's going to be something they have to overcome or get around to continue the issue that could be still happening that you're seeing as an issue, but they don't. So it's a weird situation for sure. But yeah, I think you have to have the understanding and then the will to then move beyond that. Because there are people who have an understanding, of course, but never move out of that rut that they're stuck in, whatever it may be.
Or don't believe that they can move out of that rut.
Right, exactly. They leave themselves stuck in there. It's not always just the society or other outside factors that leave you there, but it's also a lot of times yourself too. So that makes a lot of sense as well. I appreciate that. And my answer is what we already talked about. So effective lines of communication.
Well, thank you for chat. For some of you are in my world. Thank you very much. Or we missed that question. Trunk says to question yourself, like check in your assumptions constantly. Yeah,
that's a good one too.
Yeah.
You can't always just say, well, I'm right. But like, wait a minute. So I'm doing it this way, but is there a better way? And it's not always just like to prove someone else wrong or whatever.
Or to belittle yourself.
Yeah, because you could be doing something in an effective way, but there might be something that's more efficient. For instance, if you're building something, but, for example, you're using a screwdriver. You could look at it and go, why am I still using a screwdriver? Just get an electric, a drill or something like that, or electric screwdriver, whatever the hell, and just, that way I'm saving time. So it's even just small things. But yeah, just being able to question yourself, your actions, what you do, I think can be very important. That's how we learn, is by questioning, right? Actually, the Socratic way of teaching is through asking questions, because it gets people to think about the subject. So you as the teacher ask the questions to get people to process and think. So therefore, they're really delving into the subject matter much more than just what they initially recall from what they've been told. So, and I think what's nice about that method too is the fact that, people then put it in their own perspective and understand it, and they can actually teach themselves to understand the subject a lot more. Because sometimes people won't get it. They won't click with a certain descriptor or a certain example but through questioning and you being questioned, it forces you to put it into your terms, which then makes you memorize it better and makes you actually understand the information better, process it easier, or sometimes not even easier, but just overall more effective processing.
Yeah. You know, there's a saying that I've actually never agreed with, and I'm not sure who started it, but there's a saying that those who can't do teach. And I'm like, teaching is difficult AF. To get somebody to understand. So first you have to break down this complex thing so that somebody else can understand it, and not just one somebody else, multiple somebody else's who all understand and learn things differently. Mm-hmm. And you as a teacher have to take this complex thing, break it down so that multiple different someone else's understands it, so that they can use that knowledge to further understand something else and go do something else later. To me, that's amazing. I do not have this ability. Evin has this ability. I have like a little bit of it because like by association and osmosis or something. But that to me is incredible. So whoever came up with the saying, those who can't do teach, I think they were jealous. Because teachers are incredible. And I do mean good teachers. Like,
yeah, there are bad teachers too. There are people
teachers
that cannot teach.
Right. They just have the title of, but
right. It's like because they have the accolades, because they hold the knowledge in their brain. They've read some books and they can recall from the books. But I think the effective teachers are the ones that can synthesize the information, actually be able to successfully do it, and be able to recreate it within a classroom setting. And
right.
That is immensely difficult, again, depending on the subject matter too. It is incredibly difficult for someone to take that on, and because there are people, again, that are amazing at their jobs, but you get them to try to then really think about the details of the steps that they have to take, and then basically project that out to someone so that way they understand it. No, forget it. There's so many that just can't do that. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing or good thing one way or the other, but just that some people have that ability to be able to synthesize that information and then be able to put it in a package that other people can actually work with. And that is a very interesting skill to have. Overall, it's a very different skill in comparison to just doing in a way. And again, I mean, yes, some people could probably do things better than a teacher because they're in a classroom setting instead of actually in the field right now, right? So if there's any massive changes that all of a sudden come into play, it can be harder, especially the older the professor is or the teacher is. Sometimes it can be easy to be set in your ways. I've seen that too. So again, we're talking about like an effective teacher who does stay on it, who does stay involved and doesn't just kind of gloss it over because they're like, oh, well, I just have all this information, right? I have all this knowledge because I got myself a piece of paper.
Right. And hey, Sharpie, welcome. Dalmaz asks, how good were my college professors at that, teaching all their stuff? Well, some of them were really not great. They basically were professors because they were able to do like research on their own stuff. So then they had to teach a class because that was like part of their contract. So they didn't really care. And so they just stood out the front and recited everything that was in a book that they wrote that we had to buy. And then there were some college professors that have changed my life because they were truly invested in what they were doing. They wanted to be there. They wanted to impart knowledge and in some sense, even more important than knowledge, they wanted to impart their passion, their emotions. As we were talking about it, because they cared so much about their students and about the subject matter that they were involved in that it bled into everything else that they did. They made teaching look effortless, which is what Evin does, because I've seen him in some classes, and like people are like enraptured when he talks and just like, yeah, like let me go do this thing, and then like he like empowers them to like be extra above themselves. It's really cool. I really truly respect people who, again, you don't even have to have the title of like teacher or professor, but like people who have that ability to inspire others and to make them want to learn and make them improve themselves and like all of the stuff that we talked about, that innovative, that spark.
Yeah, well, and some people can be, super spiteful for very good reasons because they've had horrible teachers who said, either, for instance, you're not going to get anywhere in life, or who just didn't really seem to care about their job, and so you didn't really learn anything. And I totally get that because I've had some of those teachers too. My family's had some of those teachers. My uncle, actually, on my dad's side, just left high school. He was just like done. He dropped out because he had a teacher get in his face and just say, "You're never going to make it. You're never going to do anything with yourself." And it really hit him hard. And yeah, so there are a lot of assholes out there. Believe you me, like there is a reason why some people have that saying, and why sometimes they're not terribly off. Where those who those who can't do teach, kind of, there are some of those people out there, unfortunately, and it can really negatively impact your overall view of all teachers. But then we could say that with anyone in society. Then, oh, well, look, this person who dresses this way or looks this way did this one negative thing. And so it's, we do that innately, unfortunately, in a way, I think, as a protective mechanism. But I think overall, though, at least, again, coming from a Western perspective, there are many teachers out there who do care, who really do try. And sometimes it's also just how they're treated that can, unfortunately, negatively impact their teaching methods, whether it's pay cuts, lack of support from the higher ups, them having to fund all of the items that they use in the classroom. There's just a plethora of things. But yeah, I think overall, though, to say that it's rough because it's just not true. There are very good ones. Even if you've never gotten a good one, there's a potential of that too, right? There's just as many good teachers, I would say, as there are really bad teachers, just because that's kind of the job that they fell into, or they had the experience, just want to jump into it, or again, a multitude of reasons. And it is very, very tough. But I've been fortunate to have both, honestly. And I say fortunate because I think it's really important to have both. I think it's important to understand the good and the bad and be able to realize it and understand the different perspectives out there, that, okay, well, this was a bad teacher and this was why, and this was actually a good teacher and this is why. And it can, in a way, train you to be a better person. And hell, even if that teacher who was horrible didn't teach you a damn thing, they actually did. They taught you how not to be them. And sometimes that's actually a really good thing too. Learn from their mistakes. You want someone who's engaging and who will actually care about people and help them and educate them and help them progress, then be that person. Don't be the person that doesn't do that and return what you're looking for, basically.
And Trunk, no, we didn't move on to the next question. I just kind of took us on a tangent on teaching. I'm not sure how I got there, but there we are. Now, the last question we stopped on is, what is the most important thing a person can do to improve themselves? Although at this point, I would like to revise my answer to find yourself a good teacher. No, I still stand by my answer. And for those of you that are joining us, we are talking about, or we're answering 35 questions that you've probably never asked yourself, and kudos if you did. We just finished up question 15. We tend to go about 5 questions per episode, so we'll definitely continue this on next Saturday as well. We have this talk show live on Twitch every Saturday at 1 p.m. PDT. We run it for about 2 hours. Definitely come and join us if you're listening to us on Podbean, iTunes, or you're watching us on YouTube. Come join us live. We love to have these amazing conversations with you in chat, for sure. And thank you so much for that follow, Sharpie. Welcome. Actually, Sharpie dropped some knowledge bomb on us here about teaching. I study a lot of Eastern and Western philosophy on teaching. From what I have found is that sparking curiosity enough in a student so that they teach themselves is the best way to get people to learn something. And that is, that's basically what, when I was talking about my favorite teachers in college, that's exactly what they did. They were so passionate and so, sort of in love with what they were doing and wanted to help us, that it just made us want to learn things even more.
Oh yeah, well, and some teachers do have this concept of like, well, if you push the seed into the ground, it will grow. So you just got to cram the seed as far into the dirt as possible.
Oh dear.
But what the thing is that the seeds are in a way already there. what you have to do is nurture them. So that way there's then this cognitive reaction. There's this cognizance of that, oh, these seeds are here in my brain. Like I can think about these. And now I feel energized because, again, you got to nurture it. You got to give it water. You got to give it nutrients. You got to give it the right soil. So you got to give everything the right context and the right perspective to get people then excited about, to, as Sharpie's saying here, to actually be able to want to learn it outside of this. And I mean, you mentioned my teaching. I don't know, how, if I'm a good teacher, effective teacher or not, but
Yes.
I do enjoy doing it. And I will say one of the things I do try to do is to try to get them excited because I'm excited about it, and try to give them resources outside of just me. And I will tell them that. I say, guys, you can learn from me all you want, guys and gals, but, you're not going to take anything away if you don't start using it too. And if you don't ask questions outside of the classroom, and if you don't start looking at some of these resources outside of this face-to-face right here. I'm always trying to give them links to places to visit as well, to kind of continue nurturing that seed. Because again, you can tell someone something, but if they're not really taking it in, it's not going to stick, right? And so you need to give them a reason to care. You have to give value. If you want to talk about like marketing or something like that, it's always about that value, right? You have to add value to it for people to want to care. And that's very true with teaching too. And some people say, well, isn't the education the value enough? And it's like, well, no. The way our educational system has worked, there are people who are underemployed and have great educations. There's a lot of issues with that thinking now. So you have to really give value. And what is that value? And I think it's important for teachers to understand that value and nurture that, spark that fire, so that way then they can carry the torch. And that's, I think, the biggest thing. So anyway,
Carrying the torch.
off of that tangent. But that's a great segment of thought, though, and segment of conversation for sure, though, too. And I think it does hit on a lot of these. We're talking about emotions. We're talking about, again, how does it impact us? How to make us better, a more successful species? What is the most important thing a person can do to improve themselves? And again, we're talking about that in a way. Is either find the spark that helps you carry that torch, that helps you light that torch so you can run with it. And being willing to accept that, accepting that information, being willing to learn it in the first place, and being willing to then nurture it and make it grow and progress.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. As I keep mentioning, these conversations are awesome, and I feel like I'm adding to my brain cell count just by being here. which is great. We are going to be back tomorrow with some gaming stream at 1 p.m. PDT. We're going to be continuing on our Deus Ex Mankind Divided journey. Then next week, we're actually going to start our new schedule on Twitch. We are going to be live 2 hours earlier during our game streams on Monday, Thursday, and then the following Sunday. So we're going to start at 11 a.m. PDT. We're still going to continue to go on up until 5. So you basically just get to see us 6 hours more per week. Hopefully that's a good thing. Hopefully you're excited by that. Our Friday stream will still start at 4 p.m. And our next Saturday talk show will continue to be at 1 p.m. PDT. So hopefully you'll be able to join us on all of those days. Come have fun with us. We're doing Deus Ex Mankind Divided on Sunday and Monday. And then on Thursday and Friday, we will likely continue on with Conan Exiles.
Exactly right. Thank you so much, everyone, once again. We greatly appreciate you. And if you've missed any parts of this, again, feel free to visit us, twitch.tv/MindMineTV, where you can view the VOD. Otherwise, you can also check us out on YouTube, and the link is in chat for you there. You can subscribe where we put our full episodes up there on YouTube for you to see and for you to engage with, as well as other things such as game streams, reviews, unboxings, and much, much more. So we'd love to have you join us on there as well if you're looking for additional content. Or also our podcast, which we turn this into a podcast for everyone. So if you like driving and having us in your ears, please feel free to check us out as well. We're on Podbean, iTunes, and several other platforms as well. So we'd love to have you join us there too.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.